and thank you for joining us for this episode of Cinema Craptaculus Presents The Expanded Universe with your hosts, John H. Ford and Mario Doc Diaz. From movies to TV series to toys to comics to pop culture to Halloween, this show is your safe space for all things geeky and where you can get your geek on. This is John H., and with me, as always, is my geektacular co-host.
This is Doc.
Doc, what time of year is it? Are we heading into Christmas? What are we at? What is going on right now?
Ease up, slow down. You know, everyone tends to go straight to Christmas, but before Christmas and those other holidays, you know, we have one of our favorite holidays that we love to celebrate. It's really big amongst our friends, and that is Halloween.
Yes, and I am now living in the neck of the woods that apparently started it all, and we'll get into that, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. You know, waiting to hear what you've experienced so far since your move, and yeah, of course, our guest who you'll introduce. You know, I'm waiting to hear what his perspective on the holiday.
Well, we'll just jump into this very fine fellow who I believe hails from the very isle that I am now residing on. Ladies and gentlemen and geeks of all sorts and nationalities, please welcome Simon Wells.
Hello. Thank you for having me here, guys. Lovely to be here.
Simon
Welcome.
is a fellow voiceover artist in London, and we actually recently just met, and we've been going through all the different fake stories about how we did meet each other, but it's not very exciting. Networking. But I love what you have, like how you describe yourself, and you need to sort of define a little bit of it.
Okay.
Simon Wells, voiceover artist in London, lover of random facts, and proud Bretonian.
Baritonian. That was so close. Baritonian. Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn. Wonderful place. Can be a little bit stale and stuffy at times. And I'm part of a little weekly show, LinkedIn live show called The Big Live Breakfast Burrito, which occurs every Thursday morning, 7:45 GMT. And it's just an hour or so of silliness and fun in what can be a little bit of a dull area, you know. So we play some music, we have some games, we give away some prizes, and we have a few guests that come on and bring whatever it is that they bring on. I come on and bring random, useless trivia, because that's what I enjoy.
Can you give us an example of, for those of you who, I've actually caught your show, and it's fun, and
Cool.
I caught it right when you came on, which was perfect. Can you enlighten us with some of your favorite recent random trivia, maybe share for our audience?
Ooh, something I'm really keen on at the moment is the history of the word Bluetooth. So we think of Bluetooth, utterly modern technology, named after a 10th century Danish king with a tooth problem. This was King Harald Gormson. He had bad teeth, evidently, that was his nickname, and he was responsible for bringing along all of these different Scandinavian tribes who didn't communicate well, didn't get on with each other. He brought them all together under one rulership and made them get on. So when Nokia and Ericsson and Samsung were thinking, we've got to get all this tech together, we've got to get our headphones and our microphones and our phones to talk to each other. What shall we name this thing? Aha! We'll name it Bluetooth.
Brilliant.
Damn. I bet you could go and poll 10 people in any country of the world, and none of them will know that.
Quite possibly.
They'll know Bluetooth, but they won't know where it came from.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a little bonus fact, which is if you picture the Bluetooth symbol, that little... I don't know why I'm doing this, because it's an audio podcast, right? But that little Bluetoothy symbol, if you split that apart, it's made of 2 Danish runes for the letters B and T, Bluetooth.
For our listeners, Simon just flashed his gang signs. I don't know what that means in his gang, but...
Me either. It means Bluetooth.
So that's awesome. So then your podcast just covers like a variety of topics, or do you guys focus on anything in particular?
We have a bit of a theme each week. So the week's theme will be love, or it will be history, or it will be getting ready for Christmas, or whatever it is. So all the music we play, all the facts I bring, some guy brings some poetry, it'll all be based around that kind of theme. It's a little bit loose, it's a little bit organized chaos, but it's just fun.
A little chaos is fun. How'd you come up with the name?
I didn't. It was a fantastic gentleman, Eric Doyle and Kevin Milne, who started this, who are both based in Scotland. I don't know, actually. I must ask them one day how they came up with it. Who knows? They might have just been eating a burrito for breakfast and said, what are we going to call this thing? Big live breakfast burrito, maybe?
Who doesn't like a breakfast burrito? Maybe one of the future topics, if they haven't done it already, is like the history or the origin of the podcast in the name.
There you go. I'll suggest that to them.
Well, that's a weird segue for me to talk about the history and origin of one of my favorite holidays. It's interesting because one of my first thoughts when I decided with my partner to come over, and yes, they say partner over here, so that could be spouse, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend,
Business partner.
Siamese twin. They don't say Siamese twin anymore. Conjoined twin. Whatever your relationship is, we don't judge. When the family and I decided to come over, my first thought was, am I going to have to give up Halloween? I'm like, no. Halloween came from, it came from that. We'll get into it. But I wasn't sure because, you move into it's still a different culture. It doesn't matter the language. But I was very encouraged because one of the first things I saw at the high streets, like in September, were pumpkins being sold. So I was like, okay. And then I was like, well, do they carve them or do they just do they burn them in a bonfire on the 5th of November?
Ooh, you're getting holidays mixed up there.
Oh, you didn't tell me you were gonna kill it.
Exactly.
Like Ford, they use pumpkins for other things other than Halloween, right?
Yeah, but
some
I
people
only
eat
see
them.
them like September through, the 1st of November. I don't know. This is where our expert representative of the UK. And I love how Simon now is going to have to speak for not just England, but all of the United Kingdom.
Yeah,
Okay?
absolutely. As if I'm the foremost authority on pumpkinification.
As Doc said, we are very much into Halloween, and we can talk about some of our experiences. But I want to hear, just in your perspective, like as a kid growing up, or perhaps as an adult, or if you're a parent, what has been sort of your recollections of how it's been celebrated in your family and your community growing up?
So we certainly have it here. We don't have it anywhere near to the scale that you guys have it over in the States, but it exists. We do the pumpkin thing. We all go and buy pumpkins. We carve the faces and put a little candle inside and put them out on our doorstep. It's kind of an unwritten rule that if you have the pumpkin out, it means you're willing to be trick-or-treated. If you don't have the pumpkin out, it means leave us the heck alone. We're not interested. And so you sort of get a mixture. But yeah, as a kid, I went trick-or-treating. It wasn't a fantastic extravaganza like it is in the States. I sort of watched some classic movies. I was watching Stranger Things, and they just absolutely go to town dressing up as all sorts of different characters. We might throw a bedsheet on over our head and pretend to be a ghost. We might go and throw an egg at someone's car. They might give us some sweets if we're lucky. They might not. It's not an epic thing that it is over in the States, but we do it. It's it's a bit of fun, but it's not extravagant.
Doc, when you said that, when you heard him say that they leave the pumpkin out is a sign, and if it's not, leave us alone, did you think like I did and think, oh, well, that just tells us the house to egg and TP?
Totally. It's like the opposite. It's like, it's totally trick or treat. It's like, you have a pumpkin out, you get the treat. If you don't, then there comes the trick.
And it's funny you're watching Stranger Things because that's my generation. Like in the 80s, that's kind of the world, small town, not small town, but smaller town, suburbia. We didn't have, creatures and murderous demogorgons. But it's interesting. When I was doing my research, and I do it every year because I have to kind of re-explain it to my son because, he's now past the age of like just going trick-or-treating, although he could still get away with it. And he's young enough to still want to he's making a costume now. We're having like a few people over for like a movie night, and he made this elaborate, God bless him, Minecraft costume that the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. But I like to explain to him where it came from. A lot of things sort of center in, I guess it would be the Celtic areas. So correct me if I'm wrong, that tends to be Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and England, or when you say Celtic origins, are we talking about very specific regions?
So it depends who you ask.
Right.
Generally speaking, Celtic refers to the ancient Scots and Gaelic refers to the ancient Irish, and neither of those things refer to the ancient English. So it is very much a Scottish-Irish thing. And as far as I can work out, so many of these events, you look at everything through the whole calendar, Christmas, anything, they're all kind of a mishmash of lots of different traditions from lots of different places, right? So I can't say, yes, the UK invented Halloween. They didn't. You've got to take into consideration all of these other cultures that sort of celebrate sort of the one last hurrah of the dead before they move on or whatever.
Wait, are we talking about Dia de los Muertos?
Dia de los Muertos.
Go ahead, laugh.
Say that again.
I'm not saying it again.
One more time, Ford.
I studied French. De los Muertos.
Dia de los Muertos.
That one, yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong. That is the 1st and 2nd of November?
Yes, that's correct.
But it's interesting because they're all these sort of based in these pagan origins. And it's all about the ending of the seasons, the harvest and the changing of, like setting their clocks back, the fall solstice, spring solstice. And they thought that the spirits would, of their dead family and villagers would walk walk the earth. And so they would apparently, these myths that we pass down are they would dress up in costumes to either appease them or ward them off. It's different in different cultures. Sometimes they'd leave candles, and I know down in.
You also can't forget the Catholic aspect too. So you have All Saints Day, which is November 1st.
Sure, exactly. Sure.
So, which was they refer to as All Hallows Day, and so the name Hallows Day and the day before is All Hallows Eve. So that's leads to the name Halloween.
And the Puritans came over to North America, and they were celebrating Samhain as we were going through the pronunciation. Although in Halloween 2, they say Samhain. And I'll bet you, like when that movie went overseas, people cringed at the pronunciation. But they would celebrate that tradition. And then as Christianity started to meld in with more of the colonies, they still adopted these traditions. They must have called them different things, but they all still fell around this, Easter and Christmas. They all fell around the same pagan holidays, but they just kind of took on different meanings. And I guess whoever was the largest group in the village would sort of take over and call it what they wanted.
Exactly, yeah. My Scottish friend has told me about Samhain, and they still call it that there in the sort of the Scottish-Irish regions. They still have this thing, Samhain, which is pronounced not like that. But yeah, they sort of have this, as you say, it goes along with the harvest. It goes along with sort of giving thanks for what has just passed, getting yourself ready for what's about to come, recognition of the darker evenings and the darker times ahead, perhaps. But yeah, this celebration of Samhain, it was this day where, for whatever reason, the theory was that the connection between this world and the next was thinner at this time of year, and there was more crossover, so you'd be more likely to see these spirits sort of dancing around and causing mischief. And I think I'm right in saying that with Samhain, they had a tradition called mumming, and mumming or guising involved dressing yourself up in disguise, going from house to house, maybe reciting poetry, maybe singing songs, maybe doing favours, and the people in the house would give you food, and then you would lay that food on your doorstep to appease the spirits. So from all of that, you can sort of see that sort of, stems into trick-or-treating. Some of the food they gave them was root vegetables because it was harvest time, so they would carve turnips before they started carving pumpkins to sort of either welcome or ward off the spirits, depending on how they felt. So you can see all of these things, they build up, this gets added, that gets added, and the whole thing morphs over time.
I love that they're reading poetry and offering to do nice things. It's like, that is so exactly what we did when we were kids, right? And at what point in the reading of poetry do we bring out props like shaving cream and a dozen eggs?
Toilet paper.
But I do remember that they had a tradition where, because there was so much order in the Celtic society, they felt that there needed to be a balance. And different societies and cultures have a different time of year and a way of doing it, but they basically allowed for a few days of mischief.
Yeah.
And we, of course, we saw that recently done on screen in the concept of the Purge.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where the young boys in the village would go and they'd open up the gates and let the livestock out and tip over outhouses. And, oh my gosh, it's just like the 1980s when I was a teenager. But then, they'd knock on the door of a house and the mother of the house would show up. And the concept was, give us something or we'll do a trick on you. And again, we read these definitions, and of course, I'm sure scholars have much more thorough examples, but to Simon's point, they all kind of meld and cross over, like there's a Venn diagram of traditions. It's hard to really tell what was actually the truth without a time machine.
Yes, if only we had Doc Brown. I guess a point to that is that we look back in the history books, we're always trying to work out the origins of these things. I love the origins of words and phrases, and so many times you just hear the experts saying, we don't really know, because no one ever writes it down at the time. If I were to say the word flabberganagel for the first time ever, I'm assuming no one has ever said flabberganagel. I'm not going to write it down. It's a totally made up word. So right now, if I don't write that down, if you guys think, hey, that's a cool word, I'll start using that. You spread it to your friends, they spread it to your friends. It could be years before someone actually writes down, this officially took place on this day, in this circumstance. So we never...
On our show.
On this show. This could be the moment. Flabberganagel. Let's think of a definition for that.
Well, and before they could record stuff, you even look at Halloween costumes from photos of the 1940s, and it's it's creepy. And it's creepy because, it's black and white. It's kind of like what you were saying. Well, we just throw a sheet over our heads. I think a sheet over a head of somebody in a black and white photo from 1949 is the creepiest effing thing ever.
That you, Patty? No. Where is Charlie Brown? Here I am.
I had a little trouble with the scissors.
That's like the 40s and the 50s. That's when like costumes started. That tradition got kind of big and became more popularized as traditions became more secular. It moved away from like death, and you started seeing people dressed like astronauts and doctors and just random things, as opposed to costumes dealing with death.
Did you have store-bought costumes that you flocked to and your friends, Simon, or did you guys like to make them? I mean, was there a creative aspect?
I don't think I remember seeing costumes in shops until maybe the 1990s. So it was all homemade up until that. Yeah, obviously you just rummaged through your parents' wardrobe and threw a few things together and see what you could make. But I remember somewhere around the mid-90s going to a Tesco, which is kind of the UK equivalent of Walmart, I guess. And they had like a Halloween aisle. They just had one dedicated aisle to creepy masks and plastic daggers and scythes and whatever. And I remember thinking at that time, that's, whether you like it or not, that's America's input. Right, so we love, although we've spoken about the fact that this thing originally comes from Celtic Gaelic origins, and then the settlers took it to America with them, I think we've kind of begun to repurpose it because we love following anything that's culturally American, anything that's in the movies and the TV shows and whatever. And I've really noticed that it's still not as popular here as it is over there, but I've really noticed the Americanization of those costumes, and right down to the little plastic pumpkin-shaped buckets that you carry around to put the sweets in. That's not us. That's definitely you guys.
Doc, would you say that a lot of what he's talking about, the ramping up, because I would agree with you. I feel like you guys are just, you guys, I should say, I'm here now, but I feel like, let's just talk about Britain right now. I can't speak for other areas right now because I, haven't visited them as much. But I feel like they're just like maybe 2 decades behind. Not even, maybe 15 years behind, because we saw a definite uptick in the types of parties, the types of costumes. Now, granted, I moved to Los Angeles, Doc's from that area, so there's a lot of people connected to the entertainment industry. But there was also, it coincided with the rise of like Comic Cons and cosplay, but also like people who were first-time homeowners in the 2000s were buying these elaborate decorations. And I have to admit, I kind of got into it a little bit. And so houses got crazy. But Doc, would you think that maybe it had something to do with the popularity of American slasher and horror movies in the 80s and 90s?
It's interesting because like you can see the transition over the decades. Earlier I mentioned 40s and 50s. That's when the costumes and the going around asking for candy got really popular. But I think as businesses and companies realized that there was money to be made, they really started pushing the candy a lot more. And the creepy costumes that we would see back then kind of went away because a lot of store-bought costumes, that whole industry just blew up. So you can go to these stores and just find costumes and decorations of everything because they know that there's money to be made. Now, the big push of that has been pop culture, like movies like E.T. So other parts of the world see that, and then the traditions that we have here in the United States slowly make it to other parts of the world, and they start doing that too. And like Simon said, you see the pumpkins, and you start seeing the store-bought costumes, and you see the aisles. A lot of that is pop culture just has this big influence, and it just helps spread our traditions.
Yeah. Also, I noticed as a homeowner back in the States that I started to see the pool of trick-or-treaters broaden immensely. Basically, it's always something where you'd age out by the time you got to secondary school, middle school. Maybe you'd hang on to it. But then you'd sort of segue into, we're going to go to parties. Or you'd be just too busy doing homework, and you would just be I remember being a teenager and passing out candy. I'm 16, and I'm like, man, I was just out there trick-or-treating, and now I got to pass out candy to these kids while I'm studying for my biology test. But when I became a homeowner in the 2000s, I would see like the teenagers are out in costume. And I think some might have even been older, like maybe, community college, university kids. And some of them didn't even have costumes. And I'm like, look, this is, instead of going out and, getting high, you can have all the candy you want. But can't you at least cut out a pillowcase with some eyes and put some effort in?
Yeah, people are holding on for that last, year bag of candy. So
I think that the idea of the party is still very American, that idea of actually having a dedicated Halloween party. Everyone come to my house, everyone dress up as creepy as you can, we'll throw on some spooky music and decorate the heck out of the house. I know an American couple who live near Staines, which is just as glamorous as the name sounds, and they go... Yeah, they go all out. In fact, to give it its full name, Staines upon Thames, which is even worse because it just sounds like there's something floating on. Anyway, this couple...
People on the bridge relieving themselves into the river.
Just like in the olden times.
So have you gone to this party?
No, I haven't. No, I've been invited. I've never got around to going.
Oh man, you got to go. That should be your assignment before the show.
Yeah,
is
totally.
is we do a second little recording of you reporting back and saying
Before and after, yeah.
the horrible. Hey there, we'll be right back. And now back to the show. There's portions of the country in the States, as there are here, who they frown upon Halloween for personal beliefs, sometimes religious beliefs, and I think, if you're a law enforcement officer, certain parts of the country, probably it's a headache of a night, the least of which are kids, out in traffic, doing crosswalks, some of them wearing, like my son's costume right now. He's the Enderman. It's all black. And it reminds me of this old Saturday Night Live sketch back in the 70s with Dan Aykroyd. Remember Mr. Mainway? And he always had these like products that were like broken glass and all these very dangerous toys, and he'd be taken to task by a journalist. And one of them was just like an all-black costume. Mr. Mainway's your costume. Is this safe for kids? Yes, I believe it is. Absolutely.
I love that your son's gone as the Enderman. That's great.
Well, again, he can't move, so I don't think he's leaving the house. But
Real quick, with the Enderman costume, did he ask you if you could buy the costume first? And you're like, no, son, back in my day, we used to make our costumes.
Well, no, you can't. It's hard to find some costumes here. And I go on Amazon, and then I realize you can get anything mailed to you. But like to Simon's point, I think there are probably aisles in certain stores around here. And, I don't know if you guys have the in the more, maybe the suburban areas where there's more space for businesses to take over. But do you guys have the pop-up stores that are only there for Halloween holiday, like 2 months, and then go away?
The seasonal stores.
Right. So again, not for Halloween because it's not that big a deal. We have that for Christmas. We have pop-up Christmas shops galore. Yes.
Christmas town.
And so, real quick, going back to your son, do kids wear costumes to school?
No. Well, first of all,
Okay.
he's in the equivalent of high school. I don't believe so. Now, so Simon, just a little bit. When I was a kid, the primary schools, so it was 1 through 6. I'm old. It was different. They changed it. Some schools were 6 through 8 for middle school, but ours was 1 through 6. And so the first through the third graders, which would be like year 2 through 4, I think, they would all dress up and then do a parade in front of the 3 upper classes.
Okay.
And that was always kind of fun. And then when I got to be in that group, I always thought it was really cute to see all the kids parade through. And,
Right.
again, there were these cheap costumes. Nobody really made them. And there's a great book that Jerry Seinfeld did. It was an illustrated Halloween book. I think I've showed it to Doc. It's based on a stand-up routine he did for about 5 minutes where he talks about being a kid in the 70s and how he wanted to be Superman. And he couldn't wait when he heard about Halloween and you get free candy, and his mom took him to the drugstore to get him this costume, and it would come in a little cardboard box with a cheap cellophane front, and you could see the plastic mask, and it was just this cloth printed, almost like a smock, and with a ribbon in the back. It hung down low. The cape was some cheap plastic. The mask was this cheap plastic with a little rubber band that would like pop and snap halfway through the night. And it's a great little stand-up. It's on YouTube.
Great.
But the illustrated book comes with the illustrations of Jerry as a kid. But it's true. It's like these crappy-ass costumes. And then now, like store-bought costumes now, like if you want to be Spider-Man, you can get it like padded with muscles.
Yeah, totally,
you can get real, like spend $400 and get a Batman that's sculpted. And people will pay for that.
Yeah. I'm surprised there isn't, I don't know how it is in the States, but I'm surprised there isn't more of a crossover between Halloween and the Comic-Con, because Comic-Con has actually become quite a large thing over here recently. Again, we're adopting everything that you guys throw at us. Comic-Con's become quite large, so you get grown-ups dressing in costumes and parading around, and it's fantastically good fun. I'm surprised there isn't like a grown-up version of Halloween. Halloween here, I don't know for you guys, Halloween here is still very much for the little kids. It doesn't really sort of cross over into that teenage adulthood area. Does it cross over to that for you guys?
Oh, yeah, it does.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
it does. It's huge.
It's
huge.
not a $10 billion industry just because of candy for kids and cheap costumes. Definitely. Well, Doc, isn't there a LA Comic Con, or what was the one, the Stan Lee one that was sort of in the same weekend as Halloween?
Yeah, it was LA Comic Con. For a while, it was the Stan Lee Comic Con, but that partnership ended. But yeah, it's usually in October, and I kind of lost track of when it is now. But before, it used to land on that main weekend when people used to celebrate Halloween. So I've gone to, conventions over the years. I never used to dress up, but because that one landed near Halloween and we were going to go celebrate Halloween afterwards at like bars and clubs and whatever, my friends, we would just get dressed up, go to the convention in our costumes, and then after like stay out and go out drinking. Like, honestly, it's like here adults are just always looking for a reason to drink. So it's like Halloween, let's celebrate Halloween.
So Doc, you and I, of course, are veterans of some massive efforts, both in our costuming and going to some crazy Halloween parties. And I think, to Simon's point, I think it definitely still feels very much more for kids over here. I did go to a Halloween party last year, but it was very tame. And I think you and I being in the LA area, I don't know if that's the same vibe, but LA, I think because so many people are creative types, actor types, musician, work in the entertainment, I think there is a real drive to want to show off how crazy and creative and wild these parties could be. And you and I went to a few. There was one in the hills that the Hollywood Hills that we'd go to, and it would get so packed, and the costumes were crazy.
We used to go to multiple parties a year, sometimes 2 or 3 in the same night. It's like you were saying, living in LA, the entertainment industry's here, so people were throwing parties, and you'd get invited. And so these crowds and crowds of people would just show up, and you'd have these parties packed with partygoers, celebrating Halloween in the craziest costumes.
It was so crowded in this neighborhood, and parking, and of course you have to drive everywhere. That's sort of the downside of living where we lived. Here, of course, I haven't been on a train in costume. Well, that's not true. I was Ted Lasso last year, but not really a costume. But I remember this one year, and it was one of those parties where you'd ask the guests, do you know who the host is? And nobody could tell you who. Because they were an invitee of an invitee of an invitee. Finally, it was like finding the source vampire, Like, and so we finally, I think when I found out who it was, the next year I made sure to like show up with like food and bottles of alcohol. So, and I'd go up and introduce and say, hey, it's good to see you again. Thank you. And of course I had 15 friends with me.
Well, when you finally found out who the host was, like, wasn't he like walking around in a tuxedo or something like that?
Yes, he was. Oh, and awesome. I remember one year we were all the Universal monsters. You were. I was
the Wolfman.
I was a mummy, and there was a Dracula and a Frankenstein and a witch, and it was great. And so we got separated, and we wandered. Someone told us there was another party down the way, and we wandered over there, and it turns out it was a house once owned by Bela Lugosi. And it was a little, I don't want to say castle-like, but there was something where you walked in and said, I could believe that Bela Lugosi lived here back when he was successful. And I remember there was a vault downstairs. There was an empty room downstairs, like unfurnished, but there was a vault, like from the 1920s. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that's where the coffin was, right?
It was. But yeah, to Doc's point, these parties they'd be thrown the weekend before, or I would throw one, because then I started getting into throwing parties. And then you'd have the Halloween weekend, and there was always just these parties, and you would just stay up forever, right? Come home with your makeup, and you realize, I'm not a kid.
And each year, like the day after, you're like, I'm not doing that again. But next year, we were out there again. So.
Yep. Doc, what was your favorite costume? What was your favorite costume that you did?
Oh, that I ever did? I guess I would say Nosferatu.
Oh, it was pretty good.
I actually shaved my head for that one. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. But surprisingly, that was the year where I was the designated driver and I did not drink. How about you, Simon? You have any memorable costumes, or do you have any plans this year for Halloween?
I don't think I do have any memorable costumes. I think I just kind of went round the local jumble sale and just picked up anything black. I seem to remember one year going around door to door, not really being sure of who I was representing. It was just some guy dressed in black, and that was about as specific as it got.
Did you trick or treat as a kid? Where you grew up?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, so yeah, we'd sort of go out in groups of 2, 3, 4. Maybe it's the sort of the stiff upper lip of the British. Maybe it's the respectful politeness of the British. But there was none of this egging and toilet rolling stuff. The whole trick or treat was really a very empty threat, and everyone was sort of either came out and gave us one measly chocolate bar, or just sort of opened the door, said sod off, and then closed the door again. It was really a non-event, and I think it pretty much kind of is still a bit of a non-event. We don't have parties, certainly. We don't have anything that like what you've just described.
In all fairness, the party I did go to last year was co-hosted by an American, so there you go.
Yeah, that's probably about right.
Well, I think I'm over exaggerating the nature of the chaotic aspect of vandalism. I think that was honestly, a little bit more of an 80s thing. Because now you've got, cell phones and Ring cameras, and anybody that attempted any of that, they're going to be on the neighborhood Facebook group, and the parents are going to find out that night.
Yeah. I've just had a thought as we're speaking. I wonder whether part of the reason that it's not as popular here is because it's only a few days before bonfire night or Guy Fawkes night or fireworks night or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Which is actually quite a big thing here. And therefore I wonder if that kind of overshadows it a little bit. Maybe if we didn't have Guy Fawkes night only 5 days later, maybe we would be a little bit more into Halloween.
Can I ask you a question? Because just real quick, while you brought that up, I went to see the Gunpowder Plot, which for people in London, if you haven't gone, immersive theatrical experiences have really taken off over here, especially after the pandemic. People are trying to get out. London's perfect for that because you can get around. It's just, you can go to a pub beforehand, and the Guy Fawkes one takes place at the Tower of London, and it's a combination of theatrical where you've got performers in period garb. You actually are part of it. They make you put on you're a persecuted Catholic, and you follow them through these catacombs where there's plotting, and you have to decide if you're going to side with the crown or side with the conspirators. And Tom Felton, who played Draco Malfoy, is a pivotal character, and you see him in virtual reality goggles, so there's VR, and it's great. But to your point, do people celebrate it as Guy Fawkes, or do they just call it Bonfire Day, or does it kind of depend on who you talk to?
Right, so that has changed over the years due to political correctness, as have so many things. So it used to be the Bonfire Night or Guy Fawkes Night. It was very much about Guy Fawkes, so it was commemorating the fact that this guy tried to blow up Parliament, failed, and they burn an effigy of Guy. So we would walk around saying "penny for the Guy." So we would make like a stuffed scarecrow kind of dummy as a kid. I remember this far more than Halloween actually. We'd make a little sort of stuffed thing made out of old shirts and trousers, and we'd sort of put it in a wheelbarrow and walk around the town knocking on people's doors saying "penny for the Guy," and they would give us money. And then come the actual bonfire night, huge bonfires were made in all the local parks, all the local communities, some just in people's gardens, some, proper like local council events. And we would all take our Guy along, we'd lob our Guy on the bonfire and sort of be, down with the heretics. That's how it used to work. Now I think people have become a lot more sensitive to the fact there might be more anti-parliamentarian people around now than there were then. And therefore the Guy thing just hardly exists. There's no burning of an effigy. There's no personalization of it. We still have the bonfires. We still have epic firework displays, but the Guy element has been taken out quite a lot.
So they've gotten rid of the Guy Fawkes pop-up seasonal stores. Those are gone.
So they still sell bonfires? No, they don't. They sell fireworks. So again, all the local shops have like a fireworks aisle in the beginning of November.
Oh, they do?
Okay. Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah.
No, Doc, it's like the 4th of July here. I mean, you will hear big, full-on fireworks. People, depending on where they live, obviously certain neighborhoods might be a little more, like suburban neighborhoods will probably have maybe a little more. But yeah, it's loud.
Yeah.
Oh, I would love to see it.
All the local schools will have like a big event. They'll put on their firework displays. You'll have the local scouts sort of selling hot dogs and burgers and things like that at these events. So it's a whole big thing. And these massive bonfires, sort of 10, 20 feet high that you all gather around, and obviously it's cold, so you all sort of stand there huddling around the fire, eating your hot dogs and all this sort of thing. I would say that's probably more of a big thing, at least for my generation, than Halloween is. So maybe that has overshadowed Halloween a little bit.
I would love to experience that. That sounds amazing.
Come on over. We'll take you to one.
Well, I feel like we haven't truly embarrassed our guest enough.
Okay, I didn't realize there was going to be embarrassment.
Yeah, we need to humiliate you. No.
Neither did I. I'm curious what's this going to be about.
Well, actually, it's for all of us to share, and maybe we don't have any, but is there a really embarrassing Halloween experience, or maybe problematic, shall we say, that you'd feel comfortable sharing in a public forum?
Or Guy Fawkes experience.
Yes. Like you set yourself on fire, or, since we're in that window of time where chaos reigns, according to the ancient Celts.
I'm not sure there is, actually. It's an incredibly bland response, but because it's such a minor thing over here, it's like, I'm pretty certain at one point I fell through a friend's greenhouse at bonfire night rather than Halloween. We were sort of climbing up the tree in his garden in order to get a better view of a local fireworks display in the distance, and I fell and I went bum first through his greenhouse, and his mum had to pick little shards of glass out of my tushy
Oh my
when I was
God.
about 8 or 9 years old. That was
Oh
embarrassing.
my gosh! And it's too bad that wasn't recorded on a Ring camera. Or
Yeah, what a shame, eh?
you could. Oh my God, that's a good one. That's a good. I mean, I'm sorry that happened. That's very frightening
you.
as a parent. But wow,
They were more upset about the greenhouse, really.
on the November 5th, did the scars start to like
Both
itch or
physical
burn?
and mental. They were like, yeah.
Doc, do you have anything you feel comfortable sharing of your Halloween experiences?
Nothing I feel comfortable sharing. no, just the nights that I remember are the nights that I drew the short straw and was the DD and had to just drive around a bunch of drunks. People passed out in the back seat. I just remember that. There was some nights for some reason, like it tends to rain on Halloween. So it's like you're in your costumes and you have a car full of drunk people, you're driving around and it's like hard to see and you're just like soaking wet when you get to the party. But nothing other than that really stands out like as being embarrassing.
I just remember when I was a kid, I was ill-equipped for some of the rainy Halloweens we had in the Pacific Northwest, and I would make costumes of like cardboard and paper mache. My first one was R2-D2, and I took a lot of spills, like getting zapped by the Jawa, plunk. And then one year, there was this robot from this TV show called Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. And the robot Tweaky, Doc, you might be, Simon's looking at me like, what?
No, I'm with you.
Thunderbirds go, maybe, but that would probably be your parents. Anyway, so this little robot costume, and I just remember, and I had like the legs, kind of like my son's Enderman, but I at least made it a little articulated. And I remember walking up these stone steps, and the steps, all jaggedy stone steps, and I just took a tumble and fell, crushed, like my legs got all cut up, and I got so mad, and I ripped the legs off, so I was just wearing shorts from the waist down because it's like, well, to heck with it. And then it just started pouring, and it got about 10 degrees colder. So I'm walking around as a robot, basically in these tiny little, embarrassing little shorts. So from the waist up, I was the robot. From the waist down, I was an embarrassed kid who did not plan for the weather.
Soaking wet cardboard.
Shame.
Soaking wet. Yes. And I think that I share with you the things that I don't feel like I can repeat. But I think we probably witnessed a lot of things, bad costume fails or successes, depending on how you view it. All right. Well, Simon, thank you so much for being our guest
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been great.
and sharing some really good insights, both in sort of, talking about the origins of Halloween, but also how it dovetails into Guy Fawkes Bonfire Day. And maybe you talked about how things 100 years, 200 years from now, they're going to remember your word. What was your word?
Flabbernaganabun.
They're going to remember that. Maybe you're right. Maybe the two holidays will sort of cohese together, and they'll call it something else.
Yeah, maybe. Hallow Forks. Hallow Forksine.
Also known as Flaggen. What was the
Flaggenagen.
word again? That's the overarching name for all the holidays combined.
Yeah, there we go. Are you celebrating Flaggenagen this year? Of course I am.
And then it will come to the United States, and we'll take it over, make it huge, and then we'll force you guys to do it, even though you guys kind of like are over it.
We'll have Flaggenagen pies. We'll have Flaggenagen ale. We'll have Flaggenagen parties.
Simon, is there anything that you're working on that you want to share with the group? Anything you could talk about?
Professionally
in the
wise?
voiceover world, it's sometimes things you can't talk about, but
Yeah, sure. What am I doing at the moment? I've got an interesting mixture of things at the moment. I'm doing a little audiobook for kids who are on the autistic spectrum, trying to learn what emotions are, and it's okay to feel those. And that's got a whole lot of little character voices to go with it. I'm also voicing a series of meditation and sleep apps to help
Nice.
you go to sleep at night. So that's good fun.
I
have
just
to
tell people
admit-
to listen to our podcast and people go to sleep.
No, I have to
my
admit,
show.
when I heard you, that's what came to mind.
Oh,
'Cause
really?
I've heard listening to podcasts, they always have, and welcome to, something to help you sleep. And I heard your voice and I was like, that'd be perfect.
Oh, there you go. Spot on.
Simon, where can people follow you in your sort of social and business world if they want to sort of, follow
Sure.
you or spy
If
on you?
they go onto LinkedIn or Facebook and type in Simon Wells VO, you can follow me there, or same on my website. I'm not on the whole Twittery, Insta-y bit yet. I can't help thinking that that's still a place for putting photos of lunch, but I'm ready to be proved wrong.
Or on Halloween Memories, it's a place to put photos of lunch coming back up because you've had too much in your mummy costume. What?
Nice.
Thank you to our listeners, both openly geeky and closeted geeky, for joining us on this expanded universe Halloween journey. This has been Doc, and with me, as always, is my geektacular co-host.
This is John.
And remember, this is your safe space to talk about all things geeky and where you can get your geek on. Geek out!
Oh, I'm sorry, Simon. We flubbed that. You need to say geek out with us. It's a tradition. This is where we drop the volume, and it's just going to be his voice saying it. And then he listens to it and goes,
oh, this is the embarrassing moment.
In the nicest, quietest English accent. Geek out.
Ooh. And we probably should say Happy
Halloween.
And happy Bonfire Day in a couple weeks. And in a couple 100 years,
Happy Floganagan.
Where you can get your flogging on.
Thank you again to our sponsors of Cinema Craptaculus Presents the Expanded Universe, and to you, our loyal listeners, for making our show what it is. If you haven't already, give our channel a rating and a review, and of course, you can follow us on social media at Craptaculus on Twitter and Instagram, and you can follow us on Facebook or find more stuff at cinemacraptaculus.com. If you haven't noticed, each week you get a new variation of Cinema Craptaculus. We come in so many forms and sizes and different hosts. So, from all of us at the Cinema Craptaculus channel, we wish you a safe and happy Halloween. Was that overkill?